grab your Bible and a Diet Mountain Dew because it's time for the Brother Byron podcast. Listen in as Brother Byron brings you thought-provoking insights from his 30-plus years in the ministry. Now here's Brother Byron.
Hello, friends. This is Brother Byron with another Brother Byron podcast. And happy Saturday, September the 14th, 2024. So good to be back with you today. Had a great podcast yesterday. Enjoyed doing that. Opened myself up. Was a little vulnerable there, but maybe somebody got some use out of it. But it is Saturday, and it's a beautiful day outside. The sky is so blue. I've not seen it that blue in a long time. God has just painted a picture out there for us. And so I'm eager to get outside and do some things, but I've been working all morning on the sermon for tomorrow. And then preparing for this particular podcast, I had a few thoughts I wanted to get out there. Not very long podcast today, but I'll probably go out and mow the yard, maybe mess around in the garage, possibly wash the truck. I don't know. But anyhow, I had a good visit last night with my sister and her husband, and they're on their way to Brother Tony's church, Brother Tony Hudson, Middle Tennessee Baptist. John is going to judge a chili cook-off today, I believe. They're having something there at the church, and then I believe John's going to preach at Brother Tony's church tomorrow morning. And so they stopped through here on their way from North Carolina, where they live, and of course, my sister, this being her hometown here in this is Corryton, but it's Knoxville, Knox County. And so they stopped through here, and we had supper last night, and a good visit. Always enjoy visiting with them. Jennifer's the only family I have left, So I'm so glad that she was able to come through. But anyway, we're praying for their safe travels and for a good meeting there at Brother Tony's. But anyway, let's get to the topic for today. And I'll probably break this down into other podcasts because there's so many of these that I want to talk about. Today, I'm just going to cover two, but these are ministry killers. Ministry killers. And that's the topic for today. And these are things that we need to watch out for working in the ministry. It doesn't matter if you're a preacher, a pastor, a deacon, a Sunday school teacher, an evangelist, a missionary. Anyone who works in the ministry needs to be aware of these things because they will kill your ministry. And not only your ministry, but your testimony. If you're not careful, these things, if you allow them into your life and allow them to take over, they'll kill your ministry. And, one of the worst things we can do is to destroy our Christian testimony. You can work all your life to have a perfect and pristine and pure testimony, and in just one fleeting second, you can destroy all that. So hang on, if you will. These things the devil will use against you because they are things that we want, things that we crave, things that appeal to us. So we got to be careful around them. And these are all brought on by greed. Greed. Let me read you this verse in the Bible. The Bible says, "Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee." That verse right there tells us a few things. That word conversation that's used there in our King James Bible, it means your manner, your fashion, or your ways. So it's that thing that people know you by or as. Immediately, if you think of someone, the first thing you think about is their traits, what kind of person that is, what their values are, how they live their lives. And that's our conversation. That's our ways. That's how we're known. And here the Bible is telling us that our conversation, the way that we are, how people should know us, should not be about covetousness. Now, that word covetousness is a big, long King James word that means greed. If you break it down to its basic form, it means greed. It's a desire to have something. It's being in love with things and wanting them, especially things of the world. If you coveted good things, that'd be something else. I mean, if you covet, a better prayer life or a closer walk with God or something like that, well, that's a good kind. Unfortunately, covetousness is mostly bad because it's greediness and it's things that we want in our life. And so, a few of these examples, of course, money, fame, fortune, power. Those are the big things we think of when we think of things that people lust after or covet after. And it's always those things we think is going to increase our self, increase our status in life, increase our feeling of self-worth, whatever it is. Those things appeal to us. So for the man that works in the ministry, we must be above and beyond reproach. Now, as bad as it sounds, and it may not be right, but people are scrutinizing you. It doesn't matter which facet of the ministry that you work in. They are scrutinizing you. They're looking at you under a magnifying glass. I've got one here. I use this for work sometimes. But people, this is what they're doing to you. They're looking at you through a magnifying glass and trying to find a flaw. And if they can find something that is causing your greed to stand out and to mark you with that, then they will love that, because the world wants to destroy you. They want to destroy your reputation. Satan is behind this. Don't ever forget that Satan is real and he's working overtime, especially on Christians. He cannot take our salvation from us. If you've been saved, Satan cannot destroy your salvation or take it from you, but he can sure destroy your Christian testimony and your walk and your ministry if you allow him to. So, like I said, we must look out for these things. We've got to be beyond reproach. And a man who is greedy, he will find himself doing underhanded things to fulfill that thing that he's so wanting so much, that thing he craves. Being greedy causes you to crave that thing that you want. And so whatever your weakness is, that's the thing that's going to try to draw you and destroy you. And so I told you I was going to talk about two of these things that's brought on by greed. The first one is money. Money. Now, everybody, wants to have money. A lot of people want to be, filthy rich. That's a lot of people's dreams, is to be filthy rich. Want to be a millionaire. Want to be like old Jed Clampett, and have it all. And so if you're like that, if that's your mindset, always wanting money, always wanting to get a bigger bank account, then the devil will tempt you in a lot of different ways to try to get that money. The Bible teaches us, and especially Titus and Timothy, Paul's pastoral letters, that elders, deacons, and bishops must not be greedy of filthy lucre. That's another good King James term right there. Filthy lucre. It means shameful and dishonest gain and greed of money. In simpler words, it's the man who uses the ministry to gain money, and he'll do it dishonestly if he has to. So using the office that God has called you into to try to increase your bank account. And so you lust after money, and you'll do things that you shouldn't do to get it. It is my personal opinion, and I don't care if you agree with me or not, but this is the way that I have always believed and will always continue to believe. The pastor of a church should not have his hands in the offering plate. He should not be taking up the offering. He should not be counting the money. He should not be doing anything like that with the money that people have given. That's the tithes and offerings that's been collected by the church. The pastor has no business being in that. And the reason I believe that is because if anything were to ever happen, let's say for some reason something to get paid, there was some kind of discrepancy in the account, whatever it is, some money's gone missing, people are noticing that things are being shorted or whatever. If you've never messed in the money in the collections and offering plate, they cannot accuse you of being the one who's caused this. Let me be clear here. It is very easy for people to accuse pastors of things. We're vulnerable when it comes to that. They can come in and accuse us of all kinds of things. But if you right up front let the church know, I don't deal with the money, I don't count the money, I don't collect the money, I don't put it in envelopes, I don't do any of this stuff, it will keep you in the clear. Don't ever be alone somewhere with the church's money. Always have someone with you. If you're in the presence of the offering plates and stuff, have someone else there as a witness. There's been too many people accused of things. And the reason being because there's been a lot of people who's done a lot of bad things. There's been a lot of preachers who's taken money. And so we want to be careful about that. I personally hate money. I honestly do. I hate it. I do like to have it to buy things when I need it. And of course I want to pay my bills, but I've never been one to desired money. It's just one of those things of life that we have to have, but I've never had a weakness for that. And, I was poor the first 30 years of my life. I was dirt poor. I grew up dirt poor. We didn't have anything, When I grew up, my first 7 years of my life, we lived in a 4-room cinder block garage. It was going to be somebody's house, and all they did was build the garage part of it, put a flat tar roof on top, and then that's where we lived. It didn't have heat and air. It didn't have plumbing. It had a kitchen sink that run out in the grass. We didn't have bathroom, didn't have a toilet or bathtub. We used an outside toilet growing up. We had that's what we used my whole childhood. And to take baths in the summertime, we washed outside with a garden hose. And in the wintertime, we had a little plastic tub we'd fill up with water and boil water on the stove. We didn't have hot water. We had to boil the water on the stove to get it hot. And then we'd take baths that way. So I know what it's like to grow up poor. I remember being so poor we didn't have anything in the house but one can of soup. And I was just a little boy. I don't know how old I was, probably 5, 6 years old. And I was hungry, and I went into the cabinet and found that can of soup, and I decided I was going to eat it. And I found a can opener, and I punched a hole in the lid, and then I panicked. And I put that can of soup back in the cabinet and closed the cabinet and walked away. Well, I didn't know that was the only thing we had in the house to eat. And my mother was working second shift at Levi's. My dad was the one that took care of us at night. And he went to get that can of soup out of the cabinet, and there was a hole in it. He didn't know how long that hole had been in there. For all he knew, it had been in there for months, and that it was bad. And he was afraid that we'd all get sick if we ate it. He had to throw it out. And he came and asked, who punched the hole in that can? I lied. I said I didn't do it. And he knew I did it. He got that belt out, and he whipped me until my grandmother come running through the cow pasture and stopped him. That's how long he whipped me. I was afraid he was going to kill me. She was too. But I grew up poor, so I know what that's like. But I don't crave money. I know that it can be here one day and gone the next. It means nothing. A few years ago, we had at the church I was pastoring at the time, I had the Chuck Wagon Gang come out to perform or, give a concert. I hate to use those terms when it comes to church things, to minister to the church in music. How's that? But they came out on a Saturday, and I'd put out flyers, and we packed that place. I mean, there were so many people there. There was nowhere else to park. We had over 300 people show up at the church for the Chuck Wagon Gang. They hadn't been in this area in a long time. I was the first church to have them come in many years. Now, after we had them, there were several other churches had them, but we were the first, and so many people came. And we took up a love offering. And I remember, there was ushers there. There was, I think, 3 different ones. The way the church was designed, one guy was in the middle and the other 2 on the other ends, and they passed the plates. Anyhow, they took it to the side room up at the front of the church, where we had a copy machine and things. The door was locked and all, and they put the plates in there with the money in it. And then they came back out and sat down. Well, the service finally ended after a few hours. People had been there a long time and they were ready to leave. And a lot of people just left. I mean, quickly. And, I got to looking around and noticing that, the men that took up the money, they had all left, but they'd left the offering plates back there in that room. And I knew I had to give that money. I was giving that money to the Chuck Wagon gang for a love offering. And, so what I did is I found some people there, a man and a woman, to come back there with me to count that money so that we could give it to Chuck Wagon gang. I didn't want to be back there by myself with all that money. And there was close to $2,000 in those offering plates. So we did, excuse me, we counted all that money and put it in an envelope, sealed that thing up, wrote the amount on it, and then took it to the Chuck Wagon gang and handed it to them. I did not want to be accused of going back in that room and sticking, a few $100s in my pocket. It would have been very easy to do that. And I can see someone that was always lusting after money having that opportunity, and how tempted they may have been to say, oh, nobody will know, nobody will miss it, it's not been counted, who would know? Stick that in their pocket. We got to be careful. We cannot, we cannot give the opportunity for the devil to use something like that against us. So my advice, Pastor, keep away from the money. If at all possible, keep away from it. Don't deposit it. Don't count it. Don't collect it. Have nothing to do with it. Give your own money, but don't take. So there you are. That's the first thing I wanted to mention, was money brought on by greed. Here's a second and final thing I want to talk about today. It's already been, how long? 17 minutes. I'm wanting to get this under 30 at least, hopefully 20. Well, probably too late for that. But anyhow, I want to get out there and do some things. But the second thing that is brought on by greed is a word called fame. Fame. We are taught from a very early age to look up to celebrities, people that are famous. We somehow have got into their heads that those people are worthy of our attention, worthy of our praise, and worthy of following. So we've placed a higher worth on famous people than just regular people. Go out somewhere where there's a famous celebrity and you tell me people don't treat them differently. They've got guards around them, bodyguards. They get treated better in the restaurant or wherever they're going. So they are looked up on a much higher level than just the regular Joe like you and me. So we look at folks like movie stars, famous singers, celebrities, sports figures, politicians, and yes, even preachers. As sad as that is, we have preaching heroes, preaching celebrities, preaching famous preachers, and we'll pay extra special attention to those that we like. We've even seen somehow relating being famous to worthy of imitation. It was the old Irish poet Oscar Wilde who once said, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. So somebody just mediocre like myself, trying to imitate one of these famous people, that's supposed to be the highest form of flattery, is imitating those people. Well, that's a ridiculous statement, but for somehow that is what we've got in our heads. It's very easy to want to crave attention because everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be cared for. and at least seen as an equal. But a lot of people want to be seen above an equal. They want to be seen better as everybody else. And so, to get that kind of attention, we may do things that we should not do, unseemingly things. If you want to be a famous preacher and desire to be in their ranks, then you might do things that God doesn't intend for you to do. I remember when I was first called to preach, and I was pretty young and impressionable back then. And of course I had all my favorite preachers, the famous ones, Lester Roloff, Curtis Hudson, Lee Robertson, Clarence Sexton, Boyd Bingham, all these men, that even Jack Hiles, all these men that I looked up to, that I considered, on a higher level than other preachers, because, they were famous. They're in the sword of the Lord. Well, Boyd Bingham wasn't in there at the time. I don't know if he's ever been in there, but these other preachers, all of them was in the sword of the Lord. And of course that was like my number one paper back in that day. I would get the sword and I'd look through it and see all those preachers, their pictures in there and their advertisements and everything else. And I figured if I was ever going to be anybody, if God was ever going to use me, I had to have an article in the sword of the Lord. One of my sermons had to be in there. My picture needed to be in there beside Curtis Hudson's picture, if I'm ever going to be anybody. And so that was my early thoughts in the ministry, and trying my best. I'd try to imitate some of these men and how their mannerisms and the way they preached and such. But I quickly found out that was not God's will for my life. It was not in God's plan for me to be in the sword of the Lord, or to be famous, or to be well known, or anything like that. And it took me a while to come to the grips of reality for that. But I did. And now, I'm glad that I'm not famous. I don't want to be one of these people that are out there and, everybody's fawning over anything. I'm satisfied with being a faithful servant, of being obedient to God. Whatever God wants me to do, that's what I want to do. If he wanted me to be famous, well, sure, I'll do that, but I don't think that's in my cards. So seeking fame and fortune like that, fame will burn you out. If things are not going the way you think they should, if you're not getting the attention that you think you ought to be getting, everybody's not going to be Clarence Sexton. I know there's some hot shot preachers out there right now that thinks they're the next big thing, and that's what their goal is. They're working on that. I'm not going to name their names. If you keep up with the scene on the insides, you know who I'm talking about. But God never called for us to be famous. Never, ever, ever. In fact, God only called us to be faithful. There's a big difference in the word famous and faithful. They all start with an F. They both have an A in it, but they're very different words. So look, those are a couple of ministry killers that you need to always be on the lookout for. And I can tell you, when I was younger, these things were more difficult to avoid. The money thing was never a problem for me, but the wanting to be well known, maybe fame, being famous, people knowing who I was, that was more important to me back when I was a young man. Nowadays I try to hide. I don't want anybody to know, but anyhow, just keep these in mind, especially if you're a pastor. Watch out for that money thing. You don't want to be accused of anything wrong like that. And watch out for trying to be famous. Be satisfied with being faithful. That's the most important thing in the ministry, being faithful and obedient to God. And if you'll do those things, it doesn't matter if you preach for 5 people or 500. God's going to honor it. God's going to bless it. And you're being faithful. And one day when we stand before him, just to hear those words, welcome, my good and faithful servant. There's no greater thing on earth to think about. Well, in heaven, that'll be in heaven. No greater thing in heaven than to hear those words. So think about that. And don't forget church tomorrow. If you don't have a home church, come to our church, Northside Baptist Church, 201 Bernard Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37917. We'd be glad to have you there. If you sing, I'll let you sing. If you preach, I've got to find out about you first and see what you're about before I let you preach. But we'd love to have you come out and worship with us. We use only the King James Bible. We're independent, fundamental Baptist church. Our church name is on the Southern Baptist Convention's website because they won't take it off. I've called them, I've talked to them, I've emailed them. I've had conversations with 2 different people in the convention, and they still will not remove our church off of their website. I guess they're desperate to have Southern Baptist churches since everybody's leaving it. But we're an independent Baptist church. That just simply means we're not associated with any convention. We're not in anything like that. Nobody tells us how to operate the church except the Lord Jesus. He's the head of our church. So if that's the kind of thing you like, you come out and be with us. And we just want to worship, serve the Lord, and share the gospel. So in the meanwhile, let's get out there and do some work on this beautiful Saturday. This is Brother Byron, and I'm out.